Now, Israel says it will appear before the International Court of Justice out in The Hague in defense of South Africa's accusation that it committed genocide in Gaza. The case has been set down for the 11th and 12th of January. SABC News Correspondent Trent Murray joins us live from Tel Aviv. Trent, what has the reaction been in the Middle East, particularly the Palestinians, following Israel's statement that it will actually appear before the International Court of Justice?
Oh, well, Alicia, we know that certainly some of the leading Palestinian human rights groups, when South Africa first made public it was going to the ICJ, came out in strong support and effectively thanked South Africa for its decision. Now, this news today that Israel says that it will indeed defend itself against these claims, I don't think will have come as a surprise to many in the region. It's probably really the only course of action they can take. We certainly know from Israeli media reports over the past couple of days that there is real concern here amongst parts of the Israeli government that they could be found guilty of genocide at the ICJ. They've certainly been getting legal advice according to multiple reports, and there are two real concerns, I think, from their perspective. The first is that the ICJ could issue an interim injunction effectively telling them to halt their military operation. Now, if they were to do that, they're really faced with two choices. They either have to do that and then go back to the drawing board militarily, or they will have to ignore that. And that then opens up the second real concern for them, is what this does to their reputation internationally, because it will be very difficult to sell a message even to Israel's closest allies like the United States that they are going to ignore any ICJ ruling. We're potentially getting ahead of ourselves here. Of course, both sides will have to have their day in court, but they're certainly been getting legal advice, kind of wargaming, for want of a better expression, how to try and deal with this quite landmark case being brought from Pretoria.
And Trent, look, Tel Aviv has issued a very strong statement against South Africa. Any reactions to that so far?
Oh, look, it was a very strong statement. I mean, I half expected they had something to say, because going into that press conference, Elon Levy, the spokesperson of the Israeli government, was saying to stand by for a quite major diplomatic announcement, even using the popcorn emoji in his social media posts, and I half expected it would be directed at SA, but what I didn't expect was just how strong the language was. I mean, let me just read some of what he had to say. He said, "The state of Israel emphatically condemns South Africa's decision to play advocate for the devil and make it criminally complicit with the perpetrators of October 7th's massacre." He says South Africa has made itself criminally complicit with Hamas's campaign of genocide. He says how tragic that the Rainbow Nation that prides itself on fighting racism will fight pro bono for anti-Jewish racists. And he ended by saying, "We assure South Africa's leaders that history will judge you, and it will judge you without mercy." I mean, just an extraordinary statement. I think the diplomatic gloves are well and truly off with all of this now. And I know your next question is going to be, have we had any response from South Africa? Well, I actually did jump on the phone with Vincent Magwenya, President Ramaphosa's spokesperson. I asked whether he had a response to what Elon Levy had to say. He wouldn't be drawn too much in on it, other than to say, "We look forward to the commencement of the court process." I think that is a very diplomatic way of him saying save it for the judge.
Absolutely explosive developments there, Trent. Now, there's also reports that victims of the October 7 attack by Hamas are actually taking the Israeli government to court. But what is their argument?
Well, we know a lot of the families of those hostages have been very anxious and nervous about the welfare, particularly of those that are still being held in Hamas captivity. We understand there's around 120 of them or so, a little bit more than that. And we are hearing more about what has happened to some of those families that were held in Hamas captivity, some of those hostages. I mean, some of them are starting to give reports now here in Israeli media, talking about the physical abuse, talking about the sexual abuse, talking about being deprived of their liberty and kept in cells and the like. It is real raw emotion, it has to be said. They are very, very rocked by all of this, and I think the broader country of Israel is rocked by this. Some families of those hostages are saying effectively now that they just don't think the military option is working here. They're putting pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu to up the negotiations to try and get their loved ones home without using the military option. But not all have that position, and I have to stress that around 56% of Israelis polled in a recent survey say they do support Israel's continued military operation to try and get the hostages back. But we do know some back-channel conversations are taking place, Egypt, Qatar and others, about a potential humanitarian pause in order to get some much-needed aid into Gaza and some of those hostages home.
And look, Trent, it looks like Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is now caught between a rock and a hard place. He's currently scaling down his operations in Gaza. Is this a sign of a new phase in the war? And also the countries that have been supporting Israel and assisting Israel with the arms, I suppose a big international backlash is expected against them as well.
Yeah, because we know that even the likes of Germany, the UK, the US, some of the biggest allies of Israel, have been looking for signs from them of what the off-ramp is here. Do they have a timeline of when they're going to move away from this high-intensity operation that involves airstrikes, it involves missile strikes from the Navy in the sea, it involves artillery fire, and we know civilians have been caught in the crossfire of that and are dying in their thousands. I think what you are seeing now in this new phase of the war is one of two things. The first is that the Israelis believe that they have now established operational control of northern Gaza. Now, that has had all that warfare for 3 months. So they are bringing some troops home, but they are stressing that it doesn't mean the war is over. In fact, quite the opposite. They say this thing is going to go on for a couple of months. That is because they're moving south. Khan Yunis, Rafah, right up against the Egyptian border. They effectively want to try and take control of all of that from what they say. They also want to hunt down what they say are the Hamas leadership, which they believe are hiding out in the underground tunnel network. So certainly, I think what you're seeing is potentially things moving in terms of the style of operation. Maybe it will start to become a little bit more targeted. But nevertheless, today we've had more airstrikes and more artillery fire on Gaza. So I think for people living there, they're not sensing any major change just yet in the way Israel is conducting this operation.
A very conclusive report there. Thank you so much to our correspondent, Trent Murray, SABC News correspondent out in Tel Aviv.